Data is so important. There's lots of it out there, but it's what you do with it that's important. And that brings us on to this piece of research, FM and the trust dividend. Our research shows that a good flow of information, particularly as you get closer and closer to real time, is really valuable because it builds confidence and it builds trust in what's happening around the organisation.
So just to give you kind of an outline of where the research started and some of the key areas that we looked at. So we wanted to understand from our respondents what their current priorities were, the way in which FM is managed, the state's probably the wrong word, but how are these in-house outsourced relationships, how are they going, and what's the kind of sentiment around that? Perceptions around innovation, compliance, perception of FM within an organisation, and what does the future hold? Now you'll notice from that is a very broad range of topics to look at, and what the results are telling us is a kind of top line on some of the themes. Most relationships are sensitive. Now you can read that one or two ways. Sensitive in that you're sensitive to their needs, it's kind of an empathy as such, but for me it kind of feels like that kind of treading on broken glass type effect, that kind of one slip and this could all go wrong. Acceptable was the next one, and that's the highest ranking kind of positive sentiment, and maybe it's a bit of a shame that that's as far as we possibly think we can get to. That kind of acceptable, it's fine. It's, that kind of acceptable state. Uncomfortable, most people said, no, it's okay. Volatile, a quarter of people agree completely that this was a volatile relationship. Very aggressive word, that. And again, that's a worry. But for me, this, going back to my point about acceptable, that's where we should be getting to. This idea of a true partnership. Breaking down that barrier of a client-supplier. This is a partnership. It's an outsourced resource. It is not a service, a dry service that you just bolt in and bolt out. It's got to be about partnership because you are both trying to get to the same ends. You're both working towards the same objectives if you follow it right up through the organisation. And only 8% of people really agreed that it was a true partnership. In fact, it was only a fifth that were willing to put their name on it and say, actually, yeah, I would call it a partnership. Almost a third said not at all. Real-time information. 2/3 of the people pointed towards that as the number one thing that could change and improve that relationship. And it makes sense. If you've got real, accurate information in a timely manner, then you're going to be clear on what that service supplier is doing. That lowers that suspicion, that raises that trust. And if you're working together on that, then it is a partnership. So we asked people how confident they are that their compliance obligations are being met. And only a third of people, just under a third, said, yeah, absolutely, pretty confident, yeah, we're all good. There was this chunk of 12% that weren't very confident, or not at all confident, which is a worry. And again, going back to my point at the start, this big chunk of 60% who are quite confident, and bearing in mind they had the option to say very, that are quite confident it's been met. Again, I think some of those probably knew that they weren't very confident, but on the phone it's quite difficult to admit that, I guess, because you're essentially assessing your own performance, I guess, to an extent. We asked people what the future holds and what their priorities are. So A and B, the top two responses here was increasing uptime of estate and enhancing customer experience. For me, they're two very positive, forward-looking areas, and it's good to see that happening. That's kind of performance and enhancement of the organisation's performance. And then when we asked them about the future, what's the one thing that's really going to impact your ability to deliver on these priorities? People pointed towards, in the main, a third of people pointed towards reduction of costs and reduction of headcount. That's to be understood. But real-time data and real-time financial data, that they said they really need that. It's kind of this crying out for this stuff. And for an organisation to really trust its FM department in delivering, then the organisation as a whole needs to set the direction of, that it wants to go. What is it that's important? So the FM department, however it's structured, can then bolt into that. Here's how we're going to help you achieve this, and here's how we're going to tell you that that information is there to show, here's the evidence that we are doing this. And I think that builds stronger relationships, and I think that builds trust, and that trust translates into senior management buy-in. And that buy-in can help you look forwards, rather than having to look at the basics. Are we compliant? Are we overspending? For me, that's the bread and butter stuff. And if this profession's really going to push on, we need to be right up there with the big conversations. And we've seen here that there's some things that we can do that allow us to stop getting dragged into those cost reductions, compliance conversations, and start talking about better performance, customer experience.
The requirement was to find a FM management company that could deliver all of this. So we went to our restaurant managers and got a group. We got 40 areas, so we got a manager from each area to come into a series of meetings, and we had meetings to review and ask them what would they like. If they had a blank sheet of paper, how would they like us to deliver maintenance for them? So we took that all on board. And then went to the market to see whether we could find a company that could provide real-time financial performance and compliance data. We had a good look at the market, and we appointed Cloudfm to provide these services. And that just moved us away from the traditional way of our managers phoning up a help desk, and the help desk has got the screen in front of them and they're trying to second guess what the manager wants. So what we've done with Cloud is we've took that screen away from the help desk, and the managers have that now, so they input all the information, they can see, they can make the decisions a lot easier. It's a lot quicker, they don't have to wait at busy times for 10 minutes to place a call. They can do that within 30 seconds. And within 9 months of having access to this huge level of data, we've achieved a saving of 30% across all the work we do. So that's the number of tasks being logged and the number of the actual cost. All the engineers scan in and out using a QR code. So we've got, in an instant, we know when the job was logged, when the contractor arrived, when he left. We can then accurately accrue. We've got accuracy within seconds of the guy leaving site. We know to within 5% what the actual cost is going to be, and that's dynamic now, and the manager and everyone can see that. We know whether they turned up on time. We know whether it's a first-time fix. So suddenly we've got this huge amount of data that we never had. Completion against the SLA has increased by 28% in 6 months, and the only thing we were really able to measure before was we knew when the order was placed and when the contractor got there. Generally, you'd know if they got there or not because the restaurant will be phoning up to say they're not arrived. But now we're able to check, and the SLA is the actual completion of the job, not getting there. So I've arrived, can't do anything now, but I'm off and tick that box, I've arrived. We now challenge them and say the SLA is measured from when the job was logged to when they actually complete the job. And that's gone up 28%, so that's getting quite high now, but still some work to do.
One of the things that suppliers say to us very, very regularly, which is really pleasing from a perspective, is that they say you've changed the way we do business, you've changed the way we analyse our own business, the way we manage our own staff. Information that, one, we have not had to invest in, two, we've not had to pay for, but it's valuable information that's actually influenced what we do going forward, which has then brought them up, which has then rewarded in more work, which has then engaged, I've got some ideas, and the whole thing has become, as a byproduct, a true partnership. So it's been really, really effective from every conceivable angle.
think a couple of things that stood out for me this morning. First of all, in the research, that people that really trusted their supplier relationships was such a low percentage, only 11%, and that only 8% felt they had a true partnership with their FM provider, and I was quite surprised by that. But when we asked the question, what would improve that relationship, 26% said having trustworthy data, and 28% said having real-time information. And hopefully the case study from Stephen has shown how getting that real-time data and trustworthy information has helped his business and has allowed him to kind of leave some of the day-to-day stuff behind and focus on some of the more important strategic issues and plan towards the future. So that's a good example of how it's helped him in his business. And I'll take my free pizza a little bit later. But I guess in summary, what the report shows is that there's a clear dividend to be taken for those that manage FM in this way, and it's great to see how a strong performing FM service within an organisation can really help the performance within an organisation.